The Dodge Dart was never supposed to be a legend. In fact, if you asked someone in 1968 what came to mind when they heard the name Dart, they wouldn't have spoken of power or glory. They would have thought of practicality, affordability, something closer to a daily companion than a weekend warrior. It was the compact Dodge you bought when you wanted reliability without arrogance. A car that blended into supermarket parking lots and suburban driveways. Nobody dreamed of posters of the Dart on bedroom walls. Nobody fantasized about its roar shaking the ground. And yet, in the middle of the fiercest muscle car wars, Dodge would turn this unassuming little machine into one of the most outrageous creations ever unleashed on American asphalt. It almost sounds like madness when you think about it. Why take the company's most ferocious engine, the almighty 426 HEMI, and stuff it into a car that looked so modest? The Dart wasn't a Challenger. It wasn't a Charger. It wasn't even a Roadrunner. It was a sensible compact, the kind of car a schoolteacher might drive, the kind of car your neighbor might lend you to run errands. And yet, Dodge saw something in it. Maybe it was the lightweight frame. Maybe it was the thrill of proving everyone wrong. Or maybe it was just sheer audacity. Whatever the reason, they decided to play one of the boldest cards of the entire era. Underneath the Dart's plain sheet metal, Dodge dropped in an engine that was anything but ordinary. The 426 HEMI wasn't just an engine, it was a force of nature. Nicknamed the Elephant for its sheer bulk and brutal strength, it was the most feared power plant Chrysler had ever built. Officially rated at 425 horsepower, it was no secret that with a few subtle tweaks, it could push closer to 500. That kind of power in the late 60s wasn't just impressive, it was terrifying. Especially when you remembered that the Dart weighed significantly less than the big-bodied muscle cars that usually carried engines of this size. What Dodge created wasn't balance. It wasn't refinement. It was a bomb waiting to go off. Climb inside one of these cars and you would immediately feel the difference. There was no attempt to coddle the driver or soften the edges. Dodge had stripped the Dart down to its bones. No sound deadening to mask the vibrations. No insulation to quiet the roar. No unnecessary trim to distract from its mission. The seats were basic, the doors rattled, and every inch of the car reminded you that comfort had been sacrificed at the altar of speed. It shook, it groaned, it snarled. And when you turned the key, the idle alone was enough to raise goosebumps. The sound wasn't just loud, it was alive and uneven. Throaty pulse that promised violence the moment you pressed the accelerator. The HEMI Dart wasn't a car you casually drove to work. It was a machine that demanded respect and punished those who underestimated it. Dodge hadn't built it for family trips or weekend cruising. It had been built for one purpose only: to dominate the drag strip. And dominate it did. Across America, at quarter-mile tracks from California to Detroit, the Dart became an instant terror. Line up against one, and you knew the odds weren't in your favor. Cars that had built reputations for speed Mustangs, Camaros, Firebirds suddenly looked like toys when the Dart left them in a storm of burning rubber and smoke. Even Mopar's own bigger brothers, the Chargers and Super Bs, couldn't escape the embarrassment of being humbled by what looked like a small car. But the Dart wasn't just fast, it was humiliating for its rivals. The genius of Dodge's move was the deception. To the untrained eye, the Dart looked ordinary. Square body, modest size, no flashy stripes or outrageous wings. It was David disguised as an everyday commuter, carrying Goliath's weapon under its hood. The moment the light turned green, the illusion shattered. Tire smoke filled the air, engines screamed in defeat, and the Dart surged forward like a cannonball unleashed. Those who dared laugh at it before the race were left red-faced, choking on dust and regret. And yet, this wasn't a car made for everyone. Far from it. Dodge knew the HEMI Dart was too extreme, too raw, too unforgiving to be mass-produced. Only around 80 examples were ever built. They weren't sold to casual buyers who wanted a car for weekends, they were sold to racers. To those who knew exactly how to tame the beast. Insurance companies wanted nothing to do with it. Regulators frowned at its recklessness. Even some Dodge dealers didn't know what to say when one of these cars arrived at their showroom floor. It was too much, too wild, too dangerous in the hands of anyone who wasn't prepared for it. And that exclusivity only made it more legendary. What made the 1968 HEMI Dart unforgettable wasn't just its speed or rarity, was the way it defied logic. It was an outlaw, born from a simple question. What if we took the biggest engine we had and dropped it into the smallest car we could? That wasn't a safe marketing decision. It wasn't a move made to boost sales. It was an experiment in madness, and somehow it worked. The Dart became living proof that sometimes the most unorthodox ideas are the ones that leave the deepest scars in. History as word spread, the stories grew. Enthusiasts told tales of darts tearing down strips, leaving rivals broken in their wake. Drivers recalled the way the car shook under full throttle, like it was fighting to tear itself apart. Crowds remembered the smell of burning rubber and the sight of an ordinary-looking Dodge compact ripping through the quarter-mile faster than anyone thought possible. It became more than a car. It became a legend whispered about in garages. It's passed down like folklore among gearheads who swore they had seen one in action. The HEMI Dart wasn't Dodge's flagship. It wasn't polished, it wasn't pretty, and it certainly wasn't practical. But in some ways, that was the point. It represented the wild side of the muscle car, a raw part that wasn't about mass production or mainstream success, but about pushing boundaries and creating something so extreme that it could only exist in limited numbers. It was pure rebellion on wheels, a middle finger to convention, and a reminder that sometimes the craziest cars are the ones that burn brightest. In memory, the Dodge Dart was never supposed to be a legend. But by daring to do what no one expected, Dodge created one of the most outrageous icons of its time. A compact car turned into a monster. A sleeper turned into a nightmare. An outlaw that still, to this day, makes the heart race just by hearing its name. The 1968 Dodge HEMI Dart. If Chapter 1 of the Dart story was about shock and rebellion, then Chapter 2 is about survival, myth, and resurrection. Because while the 1968 Dodge HEMI Dart was a monster at birth, what makes it truly unforgettable is what happened after the drag strips went quiet, after the muscle car wars began to fade, and after Detroit itself changed forever. The late 1960s were the wildest years of American performance. Gas was cheap, horsepower was king, and car companies were in a horsepower arms race with no regard for tomorrow. Dodge had thrown the Dart into this storm like a curveball nobody saw coming, and it worked. But here's the twist. As fast as the legend of the HEMI Dart rose, its physical presence almost disappeared. Only around 80 were ever built, and most of them weren't coddled collector's items. They weren't parked under covers in climate-controlled garages. They were warriors sent straight into battle at drag strips. These cars were bought by racers, used up, torn apart, modified, wrecked, and in many cases, lost forever. The irony is almost painful. One of the greatest muscle cars of its era was built in numbers so tiny and abused so thoroughly that most people never even saw one with their own eyes. By the mid-1970s, the world that birthed the Dart HEMI had collapsed. The oil crisis sent gas prices soaring. Insurance companies cracked down on muscle cars, and new government regulations suffocated performance. Dodge, like every other American brand, turned toward economy and safety. The Dart name itself limped on into the 1970s, but by then it was just another compact, slow, sensible, and utterly disconnected from the monster that had shaken drag strips a few years before. To the casual eye, the legend of the HEMI Dart had burned out almost as quickly as it appeared. But legends don't die so easily. Not when they're this outrageous. The memory of the HEMI Dart survived in whispers. Racers who had lined up against it told stories with a mix of awe and fear. Gearheads passed around tales of darts tearing down quarter miles in times no other streetcar could touch. Collectors started to ask, whatever happened to those cars? And slowly, the 1968 HEMI Dart began to transform from a forgotten oddity into something else entirely. A holy grail. By the 1980s, the muscle car hobby was exploding. Enthusiasts were hunting down the survivors from the golden era, the boss Mustangs, the big block Chevelles, the Chargers, the Roadrunners. And tucked into that rush of nostalgia was the HEMI Dart, standing out not just because it was fast, but because it was so rare, so unthinkable, so utterly insane. Imagine being a collector and realizing there were only a handful of genuine HEMI Darts left on the planet. Cars that had once been built only for the strip were now museum pieces, worth fortunes to anyone lucky enough to own one. And here's where the story takes its twist. For decades, people argued over numbers. How many were really built? How many survived? Did Dodge actually mean to unleash such a beast? Or was it a loophole in the rules of racing that allowed it to exist? The mystery surrounding the HEMI Dart only made it more magnetic. Every auction, every barn find, every rumor of a forgotten Dart sitting in someone's shed sent shockwaves through the muscle car world. Those who got to drive one today will tell you it's still every bit as terrifying as it was in 1968. There's no taming the HEMI Dart, no making it civil. You sit in a bare-bones cabin, twist the key, and the car erupts to life like a caged animal. The idle shakes the entire chassis. The smell of unburned fuel fills the air, and the steering wheel quivers in your hands. The Dart doesn't cruise. It lunges, it screams, it demands. Even in a world where modern cars boast 700, 800, even 1,000 horsepower, the Dart still feels raw, more dangerous, more alive. Because it wasn't built with computers or stability control. It wasn't engineered for balance. It was engineered to do one thing: go fast in a straight line. No apologies, and that is why, today, the 1968 Dodge HEMI Dart has achieved something that most cars only dream of: immortality. It's no longer just a car, it's a symbol. A symbol of a time when automakers had the courage, or maybe the insanity, to build something outrageous just because they could. A symbol of rebellion, of excess, of what it meant to live in an era where rules were made to be broken. Try to buy one today, if you can even find one. At auctions, genuine HEMI Darts have fetched eye-watering prices, 6 figures. Sometimes even creeping toward $1 million, depending on condition and provenance. And yet, no matter how much money changes hands, what collectors are really buying isn't just metal, paint, and rubber. They're buying a piece of myth. They're buying the story of how Dodge once looked at a compact grocery getter and said, "Let's turn it into a drag strip assassin." That's the climax of the HEMI Dart story. Its transformation from an oddball experiment into one of the rarest treasures of the muscle car world. What began as a gamble became a weapon. What became a weapon turned into a legend. And that legend, nearly lost to time, now stands as proof of just how wild the golden era of muscle cars truly was. The Dodge Dart was never supposed to be remembered. It was supposed to be forgotten. Just another name in a long line of compacts that came and went. But history had other plans. By daring to be insane, Dodge accidentally created something timeless. Something that, decades later, still makes grown men whisper with awe and teenagers dream of tire smoke. The 1968 Dodge HEMI Dart didn't just win races. It beat the odds of history itself. And that is why, more than half a century later, its name still echoes in the halls of muscle car legend.